I used to think that living an unbalanced life was a thing that would set me apart and make me extraordinary. I saw obsession as a necessary prerequisite for a great life. But I was wrong. The thing that I believed would make me matter was the thing that poisoned my entire existence. Welcome to Progress Theory. My name is Garrett Stevenson, and in this episode of the Progress Theory podcast, I'm going to be discussing how the different extremes that we glorify are silently destroying our well being and how I am learning to change. If you are someone who cares a lot about growth, or bettering yourself, or self development, then you have likely absorbed a lot of advice over time about how to do so. Once you take the path of self-development and you try to start learning about how to improve, you are bombarded with a lot of different messages. Some of the most common, and the three that I'm going to be talking about specifically in this episode, are one, creating an extremely detailed vision for the future in which you see your path, you see what you're trying to create, who you're trying to become, and you manifest it into existence. Two, set massive hyper ambitious goals and obsessively push towards them until they are achieved, no matter what. Failure is not an option. You have to keep going, keep pushing, no matter how difficult it seems, no matter what changes around you until they come true. Or three, speak the person you want to be into existence. Use positive self-talk to shape yourself into the person you want to become. These messages appeal to most of us. We live in a productivity-obsessed society, and in the modern era, it seems to me that many of us have at least partially been programmed to derive our sense of self-worth and meaning from our ability to climb the status hierarchy and outwork other people. Personally, I have fallen victim to this to an extreme degree, more so than anyone I've known in my life. For the last about 8 years, I have been absolutely obsessed with self-development and growth and building a business. The whole hustle culture, self-development space has kind of consumed me. And I have collected a lot of advice. I've read a lot of books, watched a lot of videos, tried to enact all of the advice that I have seen in order to grow as quickly as possible. And I'll be the first to admit I have failed. I have not seen the growth I've wanted to in my life. I have failed over and over again. As a whole, the last 8 years of my life have been defined by failure more than anything. But in that failure and in the striving for success and the trying to grow, over time, something I've started to recognize is that in our productivity and status obsessed society, we're taught to romanticize the extremes, but they are what ruin us. A truth that I'm starting to really believe is this: living an unbalanced life doesn't make you exceptional, it makes you miserable. Now, the solution is not just the dismissal of the three pieces of advice that I already talked about. To make it obvious, let's look at the opposite messages. One, instead of creating a vision and manifesting into reality, the opposite message would look like chasing a vision for the future ruins the present. Instead, you should focus purely on the present moment as it's all you have. There's no point dwelling on a future moment that may never come. Instead of setting massive goals, being a good thing, the opposite message would be setting massive goals set you up for huge failure and disappointment. It's far better to learn to be content with reality as it is, as there are a lot of things outside of our control. And three, instead of using positive self-talk to shape yourself, the opposite message would be that positive self-talk is delusional. Harsh, cold self-analysis is what's really necessary for growth. These ideas exist on opposite ends of the spectrum. They are equally extreme. These represent the endpoints of these spectrums. And to highlight the importance of balance, I want to look at these spectrums individually. The first spectrum is vision versus presence. Someone that is imbalanced towards vision probably lives a life in which every moment is spent focused on the future. Their sense of fulfillment, the joy they feel, it's all withheld until some future moment that they dwell on. They constantly think about what their life will be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, all the things they want to accomplish, all the things they want to do, and they don't feel like they can be satisfied or happy until that moment comes. Someone who's imbalanced towards presence, their life may look a little bit more hedonistic. Their long-term growth and fulfillment would be continuously sacrificed for short-term pleasure and satisfaction. If all you're focused on is maximizing the present moment, it's very easy to steal well-being from your future self. You don't care about your future self. And when you live like this, your life just gets worse indefinitely, and it seems like hedonism and the absolute pursuit of pleasure is inevitable. I think someone who exists on a balanced point on the spectrum could look like a person who has a very detailed vision for the future that provides them with drive and motivation, but it is not all-consuming. They consistently grow, but growth is not all they care about. More importantly, they're able to actually enjoy the process of striving towards the vision and of trying to grow. They are able to stay present and feel content and feel joyful and fulfilled within the present moment rather than waiting until some future moment when they can finally feel okay about who they are. They are driven, they improve their lives, they have a vision and a direction they're heading towards, but they also focus on the present moment and they're able to actually find joy within it. The next spectrum is ambition versus acceptance. Someone who is imbalanced towards ambition. For that person, growth is their God, and everything else is sacrificed to it. Self-worth and well-being, I think, can very easily become psychologically bonded to specific outcomes in the future. If you're very obsessed with goal setting and achievements and accomplishing things, it's very easy for self-worth to get tied to achievement and tied to specific outcomes. The more massive the goal, the harder it is to achieve, the longer it's going to be before there's any sense of self-worth and fulfillment that comes from that achievement. And worse, as much as we like to pretend that if we just want it bad enough and if we just grind hard enough, we will absolutely accomplish our goals, the reality is that there's so much that's outside of our control. And if we hold our sense of well-being and joy and self-worth hostage to some massive goal that we only have partial control of, we are just asking for misery. Someone that's imbalanced towards acceptance, they look very different. They are probably very content with their life. They probably are generally somewhat satisfied with themselves. But this contentment can create a complacency that leads to stagnation and regression. There's no real direction in their life. There's no attempt to improve the things that actually can be improved upon. And a failure to do that can cause a sense of powerlessness and inadequacy and self-contempt to seep in. I think a balanced position on the spectrum looks like someone that has a strong drive to improve life for themselves and other people. They have a sense of direction. They have an idea of, these are the things I want to accomplish. These are the things that, this is the life that will make me feel more fulfilled. And this is the life that will help me make a better life for other people. But they are detached from specific outcomes coming true. They love the process of building and growing. And the process of striving towards goals is the actual priority, not the goals themselves, not the achievements themselves. They are not dependent on some achievement to feel good about themselves or their lives. They feel good about themselves because they love the process of pushing towards a better future, even if the specific goals never happen. The last spectrum is self-talk versus self-awareness. This is one that has stuck out to me over time because the idea of positive self-talk always seemed legitimate, but a little mystical and new agey and too self-helpy to me. But someone that's imbalanced towards self-talk, I think positive self-talk can quickly become self-delusion. And this self-delusion eliminates their ability to actually take ownership over their failings and their flaws and to identify their weaknesses, which is very problematic because if you do not understand where you are weak, if you are not able to own your own flaws, you will never be able to improve. You have to know what needs to change in order to change. Someone who's imbalanced towards self-awareness, their strong desire to see reality as it is can result in the unfortunate reinforcement of self-fulfilling stories. We are a product of our beliefs, and our beliefs completely shape our perception of reality. And unfortunately, our beliefs a lot of the time are not true. They are just a product of our experiences, the things that we have seen over time. And so, at least in my experience, self-analysis usually comes through the lens of narrative stories. I try to understand the story of why I am who I am and why I do what I do. And those stories have to make structural sense. And when I tell myself these stories to understand why I am who I am, why I do what I do, I'm ultimately reinforcing this story and reinforcing this belief about myself that might not actually be true, but it comes true because I believe it. And in this sense, self-analysis can create negative, self-fulfilling stories that are ultimately limiting and detrimental. I think someone that exists in a balanced position on this spectrum would be someone with a very strong capacity for self-assessment and self-analysis. And because of this, they're able to own their own flaws. They're able to identify their weaknesses, the things that need to change, the areas in which they're not where they want to be. And they did wrong by other people. They did wrong by themselves. They're able to see that clearly in order to identify strategies to grow and in order to measure their growth. But it's also someone who uses self-talk deliberately and is very mindful and intentional about how they talk to themselves in order to create strong, beneficial beliefs and a resilient, empowered identity. Theoretically describing what it looks like to be a balanced human being is easy. Actually becoming a balanced human being is not. It is hard. Awareness and understanding is the prerequisite to any type of change, but true change cannot occur without deliberate, intentional effort over time. The difficult reality that I am learning to accept is that balance is not binary, but rather exists on an intangible spectrum. And given this, creating a balanced way of being is an ongoing process that takes time and continuous effort over a lifetime. I think creating this balance, there's two primary steps. Step one is self-assessment. You have to identify the imbalances that you personally are susceptible to in order to identify the path to changing them. For example, based on the three examples I've already talked about here, if you are someone who is constantly driven but extremely dissatisfied, then your imbalance is clearly towards vision and ambition. If you're someone who is pretty content and satisfied with yourself and your life, but you are complacent, you lack drive, you struggle to make any sort of positive change, your imbalance is clearly towards presence and acceptance. These examples are the extremes. They are the endpoints on the spectrum. In reality, no one really exists on the endpoint. The imbalances are rarely this obvious. They're rarely this absolute. As a general rule for identifying imbalance, I think one can say discontentment and a lack of fulfillment is an indicator of imbalance. If you find yourself being dissatisfied with some part of your life, question what aspects of that thing, of that area, may be out of balance. Interrogate yourself. Try to understand Why am I feeling unfulfilled here? Why am I feeling dissatisfied? In what way could I be imbalanced that's causing this feeling? This is not something that's perfectly quantifiable. It is something that just takes continuous analysis and effort to understand and efforts to change. But the best indicator, from my experience, is dissatisfaction and a lack of fulfillment. And once you use this sort of analysis in order to find, okay, I think I'm imbalanced in this way, I've identified how I want to change. I think the most powerful tool and process for creating this change is actively reframing your thoughts. What this actually looks like is, once you've identified your imbalance, identify the standard behavioral patterns, thought patterns, emotional patterns that fuel that imbalance. The thoughts that constantly occur before you live in that unbalanced way, or that fuel that feeling. When you become mindful of these patterns, recognize them in the moment and intentionally input a new belief. That is a fairly abstract concept that is a little hard to apply. So for a specific example to see how this would work, if the imbalance is towards vision, this is one I've struggled with. I have lived my life constantly fantasizing about the future. If your imbalance is towards vision, try to start catching yourself when you're actively fantasizing about the future. When you find yourself thinking 5 years down the line, I'm going to look like this, I'm going to have this, I'm going to achieve this, and oh, life is going to be so great. I can't wait till this point. I just want it to come. Notice that. Notice when it's occurring. Notice when you're daydreaming, and deliberately stop. Become mindful and use a reframe along the lines of, I no longer allow my happiness to be held captive until a future moment that may never come. I instead focus on finding joy and fully experiencing the present moment. Now, the exact reframe you use should be personally crafted and authentic to you. What makes sense to me might not make sense to you. It might feel weird. It might feel disingenuous. The imbalances that we all have are unique to us, and the person that we want to become is unique to us. Who you want to be is probably way different than who I want to be. And the beliefs you try to embed into your brain should reflect that. The reframes you use, these are tools to change the underlying belief. And so they should be personally crafted. You should take time to actually think through, who do I want to be and what reframe reflects that person. The goal of this practice is to slowly over time shift the underlying beliefs that cause the imbalance. The belief systems that you hold and your sense of identity, these are the things that create an unbalanced life. For instance, for me, I think the reason I've struggled so much with an imbalance towards vision and ambition is that there's an underlying belief that I am worthless. I have no value if I do not achieve something massive. Being extraordinary is the only thing that will make me feel good about myself. That is a belief I've developed over time, over the course of my life, and that creates a very strong drive towards vision and ambition and achievement. And those beliefs developed over the course of decades. For all of us, our belief systems and our identity, it develops over the course of our entire life. In this process of becoming more balanced and shifting the underlying beliefs, it is intangible and unquantifiable, and it is a very long-term thing. Shifting a belief that has developed over the course of years and decades is something that takes constant repetition over very long periods of time. And it's something that will likely, there's never a crossover point in which you've made it and you have achieved it and you've succeeded. It is an ongoing process that requires continual effort and self-discovery. And I think recognizing that it is a long-term process with no end, uh, and learning to enjoy that process is crucial. Because if you think, oh, I'm going to be an entirely different person within 1 year, I'm going to be an entirely different person and have it all figured out in 5 years or 10 years, you're setting yourself up for failure. And you're still shooting for some future point to finally feel good about yourself and finally feel like everything is clicked. It will never come. Enjoying the process of growth is the key. And this is just a long-term, lifelong process. As a whole, it seems to me that anyone who wants to enhance their well-being and increase the fulfillment they experience in their life needs to make balance a core priority. Now, what this balance looks like, I cannot tell you. I can't tell you for myself. It is something I'm still trying to figure out, and I think I will be trying to figure out for a long time. I think the optimal balance for each person is unique to them. What the lifestyle and the way of being that creates the most fulfillment and the most joy for you is probably very different than the one that creates the most joy for me. What is the optimal balance is something that must be personally discovered through trial and error over time for you. You just have to keep trying new things, measuring the results as well as you can, and see how you feel about them. In creating balance, it's a never-ending process that is slow and difficult, but it seems to me that the reward of this process over time more than makes up for the effort. Living a life that is a lot more balanced creates a greater sense of fulfillment and joy and internal peace, and those things are invaluable. So that is episode 4. This has been episode 4 of the Progress Theory podcast. I started this podcast about 6 months ago. I posted 3 episodes in a couple weeks and then completely fell off. Other things in life got in the way. I wasn't doing very well as a whole at that point, and I was kind of restoring my life in multiple ways. But I've created a lot more structure. I'm doing well in a lot of areas of my life. And progress theory is the priority. I made the commitment to myself that I am going to give this my all for 5 years. And ideally, I want to do this for decades. I want this to be a core life project. But I will at least. It's hard to commit to that when there's no sort of success that I've seen so far. It's very intimidating. And the idea of throwing my entire life into this and it never working is terrifying. So to ease that fear, I'm committing for 5 years. And I will reassess at that point based on how it goes. But this is the real priority. This matters to me more than pretty much anything else that I'm engaging in my life at this point. But I have had a tendency over my life to push way too hard too quickly, and I value intensity over consistency and fail to make long-term progress as a result. And this year, my only priority is consistency. And in this regard, with this podcast, I'd like to eventually get to an episode every week, but I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with the expectation of an episode every 2 weeks, probably 15 to 40-minute episodes, somewhere in there, and just commit to that consistent input. The actual format itself, I want to move into conversational episodes where I'm talking to people probably more often than solo episodes. I want to do both, but for right now I just don't have the skill, resources, or time to try to make that happen. So solo episodes are probably going to be what I'm starting with for most of this year at least. This is the format I've kind of started with, is just picking an idea, creating an essay and presenting it. I don't know if this format will stick. I largely feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's pretty intimidating. But this structure makes sense to me right now. It's something I can maintain. I am just going to focus on continuing to do this, and I am doing so with the belief that over time I will learn a lot. These will improve. The structure might change entirely. But that can only happen if I just keep trying and I keep doing it. And I'm enjoying it for now. So the structure might change. Everything about this podcast might change. But for now, this is what it's going to look like. So if you are listening and you found value in this, you're probably one of very few. And you are extremely appreciated. I value your time a lot. I value your willingness to experiment and give your attention to a extremely small channel that is just starting off. I am going to keep posting. And so if you listen to it, I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments or send a message. If you want to subscribe to hear future episodes, they will be coming on a 2-week basis. And until then, I will be back in 2 weeks.